Deep in the Yukon wilderness, where the trees grow thicker than walls and the air smells of wet moss and diesel from distant camps, a discovery waited quietly for decades. Hidden beneath layers of forest and time was a steel drum the size of a school bus, 40 feet long, rusted to a dark orange-brown, and half sunk into the dirt. It wasn't a log or an old tank. It was a machine, a trommel, the beating heart of a gold mining operation from a bygone era. For years, locals had whispered about a ghost machine buried somewhere near the old trails, but no one had ever found it. That changed when Parker Schnabel and his crew stumbled upon the giant while scouting an isolated patch of land, miles from the nearest road. At first glance, it looked like junk, a relic left behind by miners who'd quit or gone broke. But Parker wasn't the kind of man to ignore a mystery. When the crew climbed onto the platform to get a closer look, sunlight hit the corroded metal just right, and something glimmered back, a flash of gold. Then another. Small flakes and tiny nuggets were wedged deep in the trommel's seams, locked there for decades. The air went still as the realization sank in. The forest hadn't just swallowed an old machine, it had buried a fortune. This wasn't scrap. It was a monument to unfinished work. The gold left behind was proof that whoever ran it before had missed more than they knew, and Parker understood instantly what that meant. If gold was stuck inside the machine, there was likely far more in the ground beneath it. What he had found wasn't just history, it was opportunity. To most people, a rusted trommel is nothing but junkyard metal. To Parker, it was a story written in steel. Every dent, every patch of rust told him something about how it had lived and how it had failed. Judging by its size and design, it was built decades earlier, back when miners focused on catching large nuggets and let smaller gold wash away. The screens were too wide, the slope too steep, and the water flow too aggressive. It could process a mountain of dirt, but at a cost. Fine gold, the kind that makes up the bulk of modern recoveries, slipped right through. In those early days, missing fine gold wasn't considered a problem. Miners chased visible chunks and called the rest waste. Parker studied the old layout and shook his head. The people who'd built this machine had unknowingly been throwing money out the back end. The more he examined it, the clearer the picture became. This trommel was part of a large operation that collapsed before it reached its full potential. Some old miners had whispered about an outfit that vanished overnight after one brutal storm or sudden breakdown. They'd left everything behind, including, it seemed, tons of unprocessed pay dirt. If the machine itself still held visible gold, it was likely that the tailings and nearby ground were loaded with what the crude design couldn't catch. To most, that would sound like a rumor. To Parker, it sounded like a plan. Years of experience had taught him one truth: gold doesn't disappear. It just waits for someone smart enough to recover it. The old machine wasn't just an antique. It was a clue to unfinished business, and that unfinished business could change everything. Finding the trommel was one thing. Moving it was a whole different kind of nightmare. The forest had reclaimed everything around it. Trees as thick as pillars, uneven ground, no road, no clear path out. Most crews would have called it impossible. Parker called it Tuesday. He and his team set out to carve a trail wide enough for heavy machinery, cutting through brush and hauling away logs by the ton. Every foot of progress came with resistance. The ground sank under the weight of vehicles, and mud sucked at tires like quicksand. When the crane finally reached the site, it became obvious that the trommel was in worse shape than expected. The metal was thin, the frame warped, and the entire thing threatened to collapse if lifted the wrong way. Bolts that hadn't moved in 50 years were fused solid. Crews brought in torches to free them, throwing sparks that lit up the Yukon dusk. The sound of hammering and grinding filled the clearing as the crew fought through decades of rust. There were no replacement parts, no manuals, and no room for mistakes. Every piece that came loose was photographed, measured, and rebuilt by hand. It was part archaeology, part engineering, and part madness. Days stretched into weeks, but the work never slowed. Finally, the time came to lift. The straps went tight, the ground creaked, and with a long, echoing groan, the trommel rose off the forest floor for the first time in half a century. Against all odds, it held together. Parker watched the machine sway in the air, dirt still falling from its seams like dust from a grave. He'd done it. He'd pulled a legend out of the earth. What came next would test him even more. While the crew cleared space to move the trommel, they stumbled across something else, a strange mound of dirt nearby, shaped too perfectly to be natural. When they took a closer look, they realized it wasn't just a random hill. It was pay dirt, a stockpile left behind, probably when the old miners were forced to shut down suddenly. It had sat untouched for decades, hidden under leaves and roots. Parker decided to run a quick test. A pan full of the dirt hit the water, and the result made jaws drop. The bottom of the pan flashed yellow, thick with fine gold. Not a few specks, a layer. The concentration was higher than almost anything Parker had seen in years. That one test changed everything. The team set up a small makeshift processing line to run samples, and each cleanup came back better than the last. Thousands of dollars worth of gold per day turned into tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. It was as if the earth had been waiting for someone to finish the job the old-timers never did. What the previous miners thought was waste had turned into a fortune. The more they processed, the clearer it became. This wasn't an isolated jackpot. It was proof that the area had been written off too early. The trommel, the design flaws, the abandoned pay, all connected into one story. Parker and his crew weren't just finding gold. They were uncovering history and rewriting it in real time. But the richest discovery wasn't buried in the dirt. It was buried in a rusted box waiting just a few feet away. While cleaning up the camp area near the machine, one of Parker's crew hit something solid with a shovel. A rusted metal lockbox lay half buried beneath a rotted plank. When they cracked it open, the contents froze everyone in place. Inside were several thick, leather-bound notebooks filled with handwritten maps, sketches, and notes. The pages described test sites, sample runs, and routes across the Yukon, all connected to one central hub, the giant Trommel. It wasn't just a single claim. It was an entire operation spread across multiple valleys and creeks. The records detailed gold concentrations, weather patterns, and even coded notes about veins of sunshine and yellow water. Some entries looked rushed, as if written during a storm or under pressure. Then the writing stopped mid-sentence. Whoever kept the journal had left in a hurry and never returned. The maps aligned perfectly with the region's topography, revealing a chain of locations still untouched by modern mining. For Parker, this was more than luck. It was a treasure map, not drawn by a dreamer, but by a miner who had done the work and left the answers behind. It confirmed what he'd already suspected. This wasn't an isolated find. It was the center of a forgotten gold network, one that had collapsed long before its full potential was realized. The leather books offered a roadmap to opportunity, but also a challenge. Each marked location represented risk, effort, and mystery. A chance to recover not just gold, but a lost chapter of Yukon history. Parker knew he had to treat this with respect. The old miners hadn't failed. They'd run out of time. Now, decades later, time had given someone else the chance to finish what they started. Rebuilding the Trommel became more than a technical project. It became a mission. Parker wasn't just repairing an old machine. He was bringing history back to life. Every repair mattered. Engineers replaced warped panels with modern alloys, reinforced the frame with stronger welds, and installed a new motor powerful enough to handle heavy loads without shaking the structure apart. Fine mesh screens replaced the old ones to trap gold that would have slipped through before. Drones scanned the landscape, creating detailed 3D models of the surrounding ground, and ground-penetrating radar revealed untouched layers of pay. The rebuild wasn't just about recovery, it was about respect. Parker wanted the Trommel to run better than it ever had, while honoring the work of those who built it. Weeks later, the machine stood proud again, a blend of history and technology ready for its second life. When the power switched on, the forest filled with the steady hum of its motor. It didn't groan or shake, it purred. Material flowed through, and the results were astonishing. Gold recovery doubled, even tripled compared to the old ratios. The Trommel that once wasted value now captured it with precision. But one detail puzzled Parker. Data from the sensors showed one side of the Trommel was producing far more gold than the other. Same dirt, same flow, same conditions, yet a constant imbalance. It didn't make sense. Was it a flaw in the design, or was the ground beneath richer on one side? Whatever the cause, the discovery hinted at something bigger, a natural anomaly, maybe even a hidden channel of untouched gold still feeding the area. The mystery deepened, and Parker wasn't done digging. Word spread fast. The story of Parker Schnabel finding and reviving a monster Trommel deep in the Yukon caught the attention of miners around the world. Suddenly, forgotten equipment wasn't seen as junk anymore. It was seen as potential. People began combing through old claims, searching for relics of abandoned operations that might still hold gold trapped by crude early designs. Engineers and prospectors realized that the biggest opportunities might not lie in untouched land, but in reworking the past. The remining revolution, as some called it, took off. Crews across Canada, Alaska, and beyond began restoring old machinery, upgrading it with modern efficiency. The benefits reached far beyond profit. By focusing on already disturbed sites, miners reduced their environmental impact, repaired old scars in the land, and gave struggling local communities communities new life. The Yukon towns near Parker's operation started to buzz again. Mechanics found steady work, supply lines reopened, and hope returned to places that had gone quiet for decades. Parker's project became a model of how innovation and respect for history could coexist. The Trommel was no longer just a curiosity. It was a symbol of transformation, and as results poured in, so did inspiration. Around the world, miners began asking themselves, how much value have we been walking past? How many forgotten machines are still out there waiting to be woken up? The legend of the ghost machine didn't just bring gold, it sparked a movement. Today, the massive Trommel stands as both a working machine and a monument. The rust is gone, the gears gleam, and the sound of gold-laden gravel running through its drum echoes like a heartbeat across the Yukon Valley. Around it, the ground that once seemed empty continues to deliver steady returns. The leather journals found nearby are still being studied, their coordinates compared against modern maps to locate other potential sites. Some have already shown promise, untouched ground that may soon tell its own story. But the biggest impact isn't in the ounces recovered. It's in the shift of mindset Parker helped inspire. Mining, once seen as a game of tearing open new ground, is learning to look backward, to see value in what was left behind. The forest that once hid the Trommel now hums with new purpose, a balance between progress and preservation. And the story keeps growing. Parker Schnabel's discovery of the forgotten giant has become one of the most talked about finds in recent mining history, a perfect blend of mystery, technology, and hard work paying off. It proves that legends can still be real, and that history, when handled with care, can fuel the future. Somewhere in those Yukon hills, more machines may still sleep, waiting for the day someone brave enough follows the clues, digs through the moss, and brings another ghost back to life. For more incredible mining stories, discoveries, and real-life legends brought back from the past, subscribe to Gold Era 2.0. Every episode dives into the untold stories of modern gold hunters like Parker Schnabel, the risks, the rebuilds, and the moments when history strikes gold all over again.